Hi guys, hope you're having a good day so far. Today we'll be starting off kinda where we left off in the last video, except we're gonna be skipping all the big boy stuff, kinda, and instead we're jumping back to the drive to Kansas City from Springdale, Arkansas. We had planned to do one thing before going to see the big boy, and that one thing was going to the CPKC Kanoki yard. Despite the fact that the last time I went there was not a single road unit in the yard, Kanoki is almost always guaranteed foam, so we were expecting to find something good. However, before we could see Obi-Wan's trains, we found a southbound CPKC manifest on the Pittsburgh sub that we thought had a chance of having a rare unit on the head end, so we decided to chase it. Things got even better when the train crossed over a railroad crossing and we heard the horn of an SD70 ACU, meaning that this train had an ACU leader. However, we then crossed over a bridge that showed us the head end of the train, and after that big disappointment, we would continue on to Kanoki, where we would be blessed by a pair of rare locomotives at the sand rack. The first was a KCS SD70 Mac. I don't know exactly how many of these are left on the CPKC roster, but I know it's not many, so getting to see one is an absolute blessing, even if it's pretty badly obstructed. The other rare motor at the sand rack was CP7020, the Army Temperate Region's SD70 ACU Veterans unit. I'm not a huge fan of the paint jobs on 7020 and 7021, but they're still cool, plus they're ACUs, so I was very excited to see this. After checking out the sand rack at Kanoki, we needed to make a run to a gas station, so we decided to go to the Quick Trip by the Norfolk Southern yard up by Avondale to see if anything was happening up there. And as we were crossing over the yard on the highway, we saw a train. It was an eastbound Kansas City terminal local with a pair of switchers for power. My dad and I both agreed after this that had we not been trying to see the big boy, we would have chased this train. After seeing the big boy and all the other shenanigans at Union Station, we went to dinner before heading up onto the Freight House Bridge for some evening rail fanning action. This was where I would be joined by Southwest KC Railfan 5519 and Single Strobe, who would railfan with me for the rest of the evening. It didn't take very long for the first train to show up, which was the UP M&L&P with a very interesting locomotive in the lead. It was a UP Thundercab SD70 Ace and a very weird iteration of the new paint scheme. It seems they quietly brought back the big flag but not the wings, keeping the mini shield on the front. I think it looks stupid personally, but that's just me. This was also its first run since being repainted, so it's historically significant, I guess. Shortly after that train cleared, we would get another nice surprise. The Kansas City Terminal Railroad's Blue River turn usually comes back westbound from the Blue River yard at about 1 p.m., so seeing it come by at 7 p.m. was an awesome surprise. The reason for this is because they ran an extra Blue River turn that originated at Blue River and just ran straight to Mill Street from there. Power was KCT 3931 running by itself. While the Blue River job was passing, a westbound BNSF intermodal came behind it and raced it, and then an eastbound intermodal came through, making for a triple meet. Once those three trains had cleared, things did not calm down one bit as UP instantly lined up a tanker train with GE slop for power. Things remained exciting as UP sent yet another train, this time being the ZG4CI with quite a consist featuring 2 unrebuilt AC44s and an SD70M. Not really something you see on a Z that often. The tail end of this UP intermodal would meet yet another train as BNSF lined up in eastbound. At this exact moment, someone walked by on the freight house bridge completely unnoticed by everyone except my dad. And instead of me just telling you, I'm gonna turn this into a quiz. Was it A, George Washington, B, Ed Dickens, C, Jesus, or D, all of the above? If you guessed B, you win. It was Ed Dickens. And somehow none of us noticed him because we were all focused on the Gevos. Anyways, on to the next train. The next train to pass would be a westbound intermodal with the last unit begging to die. Right on the heels of that intermodal was another one, but this one had an H3-9 liter, which are super rare, so I was pretty happy with this catch. My last train of the evening before throwing in the towel and heading to the Airbnb for the night was a westbound manifest with GE slop. The next morning, we got up early and drove to Kanoki to test out a new idea I had for getting a better shot of 70/20. Yeah, it didn't quite work out. I did have one more idea, but I couldn't do it because there was a train blocking the way. While I was taking this picture, I heard an e-bell coming from Mid-America Car, so we drove over there to see what was going on. But I couldn't even deduce where the e-bell was coming from because this caught my eye before I could look. KCS2 in honestly quite a sorry state. I, among many others, were hoping that Mid-America Car was refreshing these into a fresh paint of Southern Belle, but unfortunately I'm going to be the bearer of bad news here. Later on this day, while I was rail fanning at other locations, I actually met the OCS manager for the CPKC, and he said he wasn't going to tell me what was happening to the bells, but then he told me without telling me that they're getting painted into the CP maroon scheme. No, not maroon and gray. Maroon. Like the passenger cars. My goodness, they're gonna look so terrible in that scheme. And then he said that their justification for it was that these units weren't originally built for KCS, but then I decided to do some research on the Canadian Pacific F units, which weren't originally built for Canadian Pacific and have almost the exact same history as the KCS ones, so I'd better see the 1401 and 4107 in maroon, or else I'm not gonna be a happy camper. Okay, now that we have that rant aside, we can talk about the mystery e-bell. The mystery e-bell was coming from Mac 81, the Mid-America Car SW1 painted in a pretty attractive veterans livery. They were moving a recently retired BNSF GP39 around the shops for placement to be repainted into the GATX livery. Prior to this, I had never seen Mid-America Car do switching before, so I decided to stick around for a bit longer, despite the fact that I was trying to see another railroad do switching. Hidden away in the West Bottoms of Kansas City is the appropriately named Kansas City West Bottoms Railroad, a short line railroad operating about a mile of track. This railroad operates every Monday through Friday, going on duty at 7 in the morning. Primary power, especially during the summer months, is SW1500 number 3408, painted in an attractive Missouri Pacific-inspired livery. This railroad owns a section of street running that they utilize to service a few of their customers, but unfortunately for us, it seemed the only activity on this day was switching in their yard. It wasn't a total loss though, as we did get to see their largest possible pull down that went all the way to the edge of their property. As we were getting ready to say farewell to the KCRR and head to other locations for rail fanning, the Union Pacific North Platte to North Little Rock Mega Train came by. The next place we visited for rail fanning was Fairfax, Kansas, which turned out to be a huge mistake. Fairfax is by far the most unsafe place I've ever visited while rail fanning. The entire time I was in this city, I was on edge. The reason we came to Fairfax was to go to railway service contractors and see if Milwaukee Road 156 was visible there. It wasn't. And when we got there was this really mean-looking guy staring at us from behind the gate, so we just decided to get the hell out of Dodge. We did get a glimpse of some rare power, including 2 Alco C415s, Santa Fe 534 being restored, and no sign of PNWR 1501, meaning it's probably inside the shop getting restored, but it was not worth feeling as unsafe as I did here. Looking for an opportunity to feel safer while rail fanning, we headed to Santa Fe Junction, where we would instantly be greeted by the Kansas City to Lincoln Manifest train with one of my local SD60Ms trailing. I don't know what it's doing going to Lincoln, but there it is! Also, trailing second on this train was a BNSF AC44. A few of my friends have been trying to convince me this summer that BNSF AC44s are rare. You guys know who you are. So I'm gonna start an AC44 counter to prove to them that AC44s aren't rare. While that train was passing, BNSF ran a stock standard grain train over the flyover. The next train to pass would be an empty grain train following the Kicklin north. The grain train would have a meet with a westbound intermodal that had a rare horn on the leader. I'm not sure if it's a K5HLA or a K5HLB, but I'm sure some horn whiz in the comments can tell me which one it is. After that train passed, we got tired of the obnoxious buzzing coming from Santa Fe Junction, so we decided to relocate to Union Station, where I would encounter train fan lines and Consolidation Productions, who I would railfan with for most of the afternoon. I guess it wasn't afternoon yet, but whatever. The first train I would catch on the bridge was an eastbound intermodal with an H2 GEVO on the rear. The next train was the center of big excitement. The KCT Blue River turned with a Bumblebee GP35R leading. Unfortunately, Union Station isn't a horn zone, so we didn't get to hear the amazing RS3L that this unit has. Still a great catch, though. The next train to pass would be yet another BNSF intermodal with a solo GEVO leading. This train did have an H3-9 on the back, but for some reason my camcorder didn't record it. Also, by this point the goal had become to catch an H1 leader with a fake bonnet coming westbound, so we were going to be staying here until that train passed. Following right behind that intermodal was the KCK gal. And as soon as that train cleared, a westbound Q came by with an ace leading. This train would have a meet with an eastbound UP manifest. And the minute this train cleared, UP ran a manifest in the other direction. Continuing the streak of UP trains, following right on the heels of this manifest was a westbound empty coal. But to break the streak of UP trains, it raced a westbound BNSF intermodal.
You want to see it pop out of there? Yes. Sorry, Sam. I'm so sorry I got you. He's gonna go under and then he's gonna probably shoot. He's probably gonna go under.
Just then, the DPUs of the coal train showed up, and two of them were pretty weird. The third mid-DPU was a GEVO that only had its nose repainted, and the fourth one was a cab flag GEVO. It would be a little bit of a wait before we caught our next train, which was a mysterious grain train. I can't tell if it's loaded or empty. This train would have a meet with an eastbound CPKC coal load. The next train to pass would be the westbound Amtrak Missouri River Runner. While the River Runner was dropping off its inbound passengers, yet another westbound BNSF intermodal would come by. Right on the tail of that intermodal was the KCT Blue River turn going home. It seems they also found a friend somewhere along the way. Where? I don't know. Once this train had cleared, the H1 leader finally got its signal to head into Argentine Yard, and then Amtrak went to Santa Fe Junction, turned around, and came back before that happened. Once Amtrak had gotten back into the station, the H1 leader with his fake bonnet friend finally came by, leading the QNWH LAC. This train had the golden swoosh on it before it got on the BNSF, but they took it off at the interchange point. I don't know why, but it's still a cool concept. Once the H1 leader with the fake bonnet had passed, we left Union Station to go try one more time to get a good shot of 7020 at Kanoki Yard. And when we got there, the train that was blocking our opportunity was still there. However, it was on the move. It was a UP transfer job returning to Armourdale with disgusting garbage for power. Once those disgusting SD40Ns were out of the way, we could finally get our opportunity to shoot 7020 from the south side of the yard. And oh my goodness, these shots are so much better than the ones we had previously. Once we had taken enough pictures to be satisfied, we headed over to the Norfolk Southern Yard at Avondale because I wanted to see if anything was happening there. And wouldn't you know it, as we were crossing over the yard on the highway, a train went by eastbound. What was it? It was those same two KCT switchers pulling a local eastbound. Since we had completely ignored them the day before, we decided to go catch them this time. And as we parked to set up for a run-by, we encountered two other rail fans. Who were they, you ask? It was the same two guys I met in Arkansas in the A&M. What are the chances? After passing us here on the quote-unquote main line, they would stop to back into the industrial spur in the foreground.
In the wild. Yeah, you win this. I'll take a picture for him. I told him for years, man, that is so look at that thing. It's a three-way stone. He said they don't exist, and he gave when I put one on my module. Here, I'll even get it exploded.
Yeah, it looks like the left track has been partially ripped out, but that's a three-way switch.
I'm still counting it. I'm still counting it because one rail is still tied in. That's the only reason why we're counting it. Dude, that is gnarly looking. I do. That's crazy. There's one switch stand for each switch, though. There should have been a second one for that further back point there. See what had two switch stands. Just for the one second one.
Help, here they come.
Oh.
While we were watching KCT switch in the gauntlet of industries, Norfolk Southern ran a power move into Avondale that I assume came from the UP, and this power move had none other than an SD70 ACC trailing. I've been wanting to see one of these ever since I heard rumors that their time on Norfolk Southern was limited, so getting to see one by complete chance was absolutely amazing. Granted, it wasn't the best shot ever, but I got to see it, so I really can't complain. I'd also get a shot of the KCT switchers rolling past the SD70 ACC before I headed to other locations. Oh yeah, and there was an Operation Lifesaver Jeep in the shot too. After I got this video, we headed off to Santa Fe Junction to catch a very late and sad Amtrak Southwest Chief. When we arrived at Santa Fe Junction, we would be greeted by the unusual sight of an empty coal train coming off the Transcon. This was an empty Kansas City Power and Light coal train coming from the power plant in Lawrence. While this train was passing, the Cement City local spawned in. Once both of those trains had cleared, the Northtown to Tulsa Priority Manifest came by with an H1-9 trailing second. After that, it was finally time for the day's Amtrash special. The nearly 12-hour late Southwest Chief with a BNSF-9 leading. Unfortunately, going down low to catch this train meant I missed a UP Tier 4 ace leader on the UP High Line that was directly above me, which still kind of annoys me, but it's whatever. Once Amtrak had passed Santa Fe Junction, we headed to Union Station to finish off the evening rail fanning there. As soon as we arrived, a westbound UP empty grain train came by with a Thundercab Ace in the lead. Union Station being Union Station means that the UP grain train has to meet a BNSF intermodal. After those two trains had cleared, arguably the highlight of the evening came by. You see, just a few minutes earlier I had been on the phone with my grandma talking about how I had seen an H1 leader that day but not a fake bonnet leader, and then this train happened to have a fake bonnet leader. The chances of a coincidence happening like this are so low that it was pretty awesome to see the fake bonnet round the corner.
Oh my goodness.
The next train to pass by will be a westbound BNSF manifest with a pretty decent lash up. Trailing third on the head end was a Thundercab Ace and the rear DPU was an H1-9. The next train to pass by was the second section KCK gal with a boring pair of Gevos. The final train we would catch on this evening would be a westbound hotshot intermodal. No stereotypes were harmed in the filming of this train. The next day, my birthday of July 23rd, we headed straight to Santa Fe Junction early in the morning to get a parking spot for Big Boy. The action would start before we even reached the air quotes parking lot, as a northbound manifest went by. Action increased a little bit as a UP loaded coal train came by while the manifest was passing. Once that train had passed, I encountered fellow railfans Grandma, Grandpa, Salagi railfan, and the random Des Moines railfan, who are all here for Big Boy and whatever other freight action came by. Once that manifest had cleared, BNSF sent an eastbound intermodal up the flyover with an H3-9 trailing. After that train passed, some ACH slop came by on the Fort Scott.
also looks radiated.
The next train to pass was the always short Z LPK WSP. The last train to pass through the junction before Big Boy arrived was an eastbound vehicle train. After that train had cleared, Big Boy arrived into Santa Fe Junction and raced a westbound UP local with a Missouri Pacific caboose on the rear. I showed this clip in the last video, but we're going to show it again just because of how awesome it is. As soon as those two trains had cleared, another train showed up, this one being a westbound BNSF manifest with an NS unit trailing second. While this train was passing, an eastbound manifest with 2 GEVOs came by. Now here is where things finally start to get insane. The next train to pass would be a westbound cattle feed train with a Thundercab SD70H trailing second. Fortunately, this time it was one of the high headlight ones. After that train had cleared the diamonds, the UP local with the caboose came back.
Well, yeah, but you could have just hit straight down this way originally. Yeah. What if you gotta go pick up a few extra cars, park on the bridge, grab a few extra cars? What?
So it kind of sucks when it's like close to what you're seeing.
No, I didn't have this one. It doesn't look like you're pretty close.
After the local went back by, UP spawned in another loaded coal train, which would lead to one of the greatest events of the entire day. This coal train would have a meet with 2 BNSF trains. The first BNSF train was an eastbound intermodal that was powered by a solid consist of H1-9s. One of the other rail fans that was there had decided to not record this presumably GEVO-powered train, and he was certainly expressing his disbelief when it went by. Things got even crazier as the second BNSF train showed up carrying an H3-9 on its head-end consist, as well as the DPUs of the UP coal train, including a mini shield AC44. All of a sudden, a UP manifest showed up out of absolutely nowhere with an amazing duo of power on the head end and a nice cut of ballast cars as well. While these three trains were passing, a northbound showed up on the Fort Scott, and it was definitely something unexpected. It was a northbound high and wide special with a solo GEVO for power. Why they didn't just put this car on the front of a random manifest train, I don't know, but it was still cool to see. The next train to pass by was a boring GEVO intermodal on the flyover. Next up was an empty coal on the Scott. After that train had passed, things got exciting again as the KCT made their Thursday run to the NS interchange. Leading was one of the Bumblebee GP35s, and thankfully this train crosses over the road, so we got to hear its amazing RS3L horn. While this train was passing, BNSF's Kanoki transfer went back to Argentine with a fake bonnet leader. After that local went by, another coal train came by on the Fort Scott. Following right behind the coal train was a southbound local with a Santa Fe caboose. However, the local's spotlight would be stolen by a westbound CPKC grain train with a very rare KCS ET44 AC leading, one of just 25 on the roster. After those two trains had passed, a westbound BNSF combo grainer with an H2 GEVO leader and a rare AC44 C4M came by. UP just couldn't resist throwing in another coal train. After that meet had happened, KCT sent their Blue River turn east. Once the Blue River turn had cleared, BNSF sent their St. Joseph local through the junction to Argentine. This train had a few hopper cars on it that were marked with reporting mark Cat X, but they had dog paws on them, which was kind of weird to see.
It sounds like the white pass. Oh, ew, it has a snoot nose on it too.
The last train to pass through the junction before we headed to the freight house for lunch was a unit train of heavy-duty 8-axle flat cars heading south to Birmingham. While we were at the freight house, the only train to pass that was worth mentioning or that I got a good shot of was the Blue River turn going home. As soon as we got back to SFJ, this happened. The DPUs of a southbound coal drag, including an NSDC Gevo and a Montana Rail-Link SD70 Ace, passed by. Pretty neat duo, if you ask me. Also, don't question how I got this shot. Following right on the tail of the coal train was a southbound loaded Herzog automated conveyor ballast train, which was pretty cool. The last train we would catch before leaving the junction was an eastbound Union Pacific loaded coal with a pair of unrebuilt AC44s for power. After that train had passed, we left Santa Fe Junction and headed to BNSF's Argentine yard, passing Big Blue working at Doc's caboose on the way. When we arrived at Argentine, we were met by an insane surprise. I guess surprise Zez would have been a better term because holy moly, the shops were stacked on this day. First things first, there was an eastbound funeral train of SD40-2s entering the yard with 2 BNs in the mix, and then sitting in the shops already were an MRL SD40, another BN SD40, and a Santa Fe war bonnet. I wasn't expecting anything cool to be here, so seeing all of this unexpectedly was incredible. Just then, the eastbound St. Joseph local left Argentine, and what did it have in its consist? Quite a lash-up, huh? My attention was quickly diverted away from this train as I noticed a Jeep dragging an oil-drenched Dash 9 to the weird shed thing that's located at Argentine. As I walked over to figure out what was going on, the overstimulation maxing would continue as another power move would race it with the purple-nosed Jevo leading. This is where I also figured out that the shed thing is actually an engine wash. I think I can safely say that was one of the coolest and most unique shots I've ever filmed in my entire life. Let me know down below if you guys agree. After that excitement was done, it was time for us to leave the bridge and go to a gas station. But the excitement wasn't over just yet.
So, we are literally just in Quick Trip getting gas so we can head back home. Look what's over here. Heritage Hopper. What is this day? This is crazy.
After that, we left Kansas City for good and headed to the small town of Baldwin City, Kansas to observe not vandalize, the locomotives there. I've heard from some friends that this railroad likes to bully rail fans, so I wasn't keen on spending too long there. The only locomotives we could see from the public spot that we chose to take photos from were the Army Jeep and a Cimarron Valley GP30, as well as some locomotives from the Foamer Express back in February. After we were done there, we got back on the interstate and didn't get off again until Cassidy. You see, earlier in the day I had gotten an update that BNSF 1776 was leading a Z train that was projected to be in my home territory around sunset. So we reasoned that with a little bit of luck we could maybe pace the train at Cassidy around dusk. Once we had gotten off the highway, we began heading west towards the start of pacing, and on our way we would encounter several trains. Now that all those trains are out of the way, we could finally kick back and wait for 1776 to arrive. By this point it was around 8 p.m. and we had just gotten an update from one of my friends that had passed Augusta, so we knew we wouldn't have to wait terribly long before it showed up. And sure enough, around 8:30 we started hearing its K5HL off in the distance. So we got into position to pace this amazing train. Also, I guess BNSF just made it a requirement that every time I pace a train out here it has to have one of the sequencer guys on board, so you already know 1776 had one of the sequencer guys on it. Now that definitely tops the H2 Givo for my most peak pacing experience ever. Absolute cinema. What a way to end off my birthday. And with that, we can finally close the door on this absolutely insane video. Thanks to everyone who supported this trip and made it possible, and to all the rail fans I met along the way. Here's to another great Kansas City Birthday Foam Fest next year.